Hi, I'm John Messina, Athletic Director, St. Lucie West Centennial High School, and home of the show Hey Coach. For our next edition today, we're going to welcome our two new athletic directors, Jill Corey from Lincoln Park Academy.
Thank you, John.
And Pete Crespo from Fort Pierce Central Academy.
Hey, John.
You guys ready to leave after a few months now, or
Still hanging in.
still hanging in? I know it's a big transition, and both of you have done wonderful jobs so far. Jill, let's start with you.
Okay.
Your background before you got into coaching, before you got into being an athletic director.
Okay, well, from Indiana.
Okay.
Okay, I coached there for 7 years and taught PE. Came to Lincoln Park in 1990. Started the volleyball program in 1994. Taught physical education up until last year, and when dear John Justice decided to leave us to go to the Tennessee mountains, I thought, this is my opportunity. This is something I'd like to try, so I went for the athletic director's job.
Now, is Indiana as big as basketball as they say?
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely. It's
Yes,
basketball and nothing
yes.
else, right?
And it's like football down here.
Yeah, basketball's
in
up
Indiana.
there.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay. Peter, tell me a little bit about your background, my friend.
Elementary, middle school from Hillsborough County, Brandon area. Moved over to St. Lucie County in 1988, where I attended Fort Pierce Central as a freshman. And then went my last 3 years, Port St. Lucie opened up, and so I attended PSL, where I wrestled and played football there. And then went to Indian River, UCF, and then came back as a teacher in 1998 at Forest Grove and started coaching at Westwood before I ended up at Central.
Now, being near Brandon with the great wrestling tradition, is that how you got a little bit into wrestling?
Yeah, my father wrestled in Jersey for a little bit, New Jersey, and my brother wrestled 1 year at Brandon, and I went to a couple camps at Brandon, and so I got to experience a little bit of wrestling.
Right.
And then when I came over for high school over in St. Lucie County, I continued.
Jill, what got you into coaching? Why would you coach, or why did you start to coach? Okay.
Well, it was the love of sports in high school.
Okay.
And back then it was called GAA, Girls Athletic Association.
Really?
We only had basketball and volleyball and track at the time.
Now, you didn't have the basketball where they didn't go past half court. You had the real.
Oh no, we actually had the 5 players.
But
We got to play the
But there
full court.
were states that you
Yes.
didn't go past half court
Exactly.
with that, right?
3 players on each end, and yes, so we weren't quite that ancient at that time. But anyway, the love of the game, and then playing in college, and I
Okay.
thought this is what I want to do the rest of my life. so.
Good for you. Pete?
Why get into coaching?
Yes.
Well, in high school, I participated in, like I said, football, wrestling, and I thought about engineering at first, but then one of my teachers approached me about teaching, and I thought I'm good in math, so math teacher, coach, and I've always been competitive, so that's the route I took.
And the math always helped you with coaching,
Yes,
right?
yes, it does.
Okay, absolutely. Okay, now this is a little bit of a tough question here, but I want you to think about it. Your most memorable experience when you were coaching. Okay?
Mine would be when John Justice and I were coaching girls softball.
Okay.
We always had a big rival with John Carroll and Roger Matthews. We had many good teams.
Who's now your coach?
Yes,
Okay.
exactly, and he's a very, very
Yes,
good
yes,
coach.
he is. Okay.
And we always had difficulties beating his team, and the season that we finally did, that was the icing on the cake that year for not only the players but for John and I. So that's the one that sticks out.
Now, do
I
you
think.
remind Roger of that all the time?
No, I don't rub that in.
But
because
you think about it.
He beat us several times before that, but yes, I would remind him
Okay.
of that. Yes, sir.
Pete?
Mine's probably going back to my second year of coaching, from my first to my second year, watching the kids develop, because it's the same group of kids in wrestling. From that first year, where they didn't know anything, and then their second year when they're competing for state placing at the state tournament, and then their transition from being shy kids to now outgoing, and they're motivated, their grades, all honor roll, those kids. That first group of kids, I'll never forget.
That was, and you took them all the way to the state.
Yeah, I think the first year we finished. My second year coaching, we were 7th in the state.
That's great. I mean, if you have not ever been to the wrestling tournament up in Lakeland, it is a sight to behold up there, why did you become an athletic director? I shouldn't be asking you this now. I should wait to June. Okay.
Sometimes you ask yourself right now with
Yes.
these long nights, why did I become
Yes.
an athletic director? But it's the love of the school. I've been at Lincoln Park now for 26 years, and it's
Yeah.
dear to my heart. And to make that drive every morning to come to school, it's just something that I felt that I needed to do.
That's a great answer. I was at, I've been at Centennial for 18, and I was at Pace for 20, and
Yeah.
that's probably word for word what I would have said too. Pete, same thing?
Basically,
Yeah.
and not, just have a program that I inherited a program that was 1 in 15, and then developed it to a
Yeah.
ranked team,
Yeah.
and helping out the other, maybe try to get other coaches that are motivated like myself when
Yeah.
I was, and try to get them to, do the same thing. So to benefit the school, help out the school.
The biggest problem I see being an athletic director is sometimes with all the requirements that we have to do. And I was talking with Joe and Pete before the show started. I was saying years ago, I can clear a whole team in about 6-7 minutes. Now it takes half hour, 45 minutes for all the paperwork we have to do. Sometimes with all the stuff we do, you lose the touch with the everyday kids. I know I miss that coaching. I mean, I volunteered a lot with softball over the years and with baseball over the years. I'm probably going to help with softball this year a little bit too. But you lose that touch with the kids. And I think that's the biggest drawback as being an athletic director, that we don't have the day-to-day. Somebody says, well, who's that guy over there? Well, I know him. I know him because his name's on a sheet, but I don't know him to talk to. And I think that's the biggest thing. Now, let's talk about your schools for a while. And both of you are out of schools that have great traditions in athletics in St. Lucie, not just in St. Lucie County, but in the whole state. Lincoln Park,
Yes.
okay?
Girls basketball.
Okay.
What can I say about Coach Adams and his girls basketball
Yeah.
teams? They do a wonderful
Yeah.
job every year. Our girls softball team with
Yeah.
Roger Matthews made it to the state
Right,
finals
right.
last year. Awesome program there. Cross country, I got to travel with them this year to the state
Yeah.
finals, and
Now,
that's
isn't that an experience?
Oh, that event is something
it's-
to see.
yeah.
Yes, it was a magical time.
Yeah.
Yes, and our kids, not only athletic wise, but academic, our kids
Okay.
excel. So yes.
Pete, I know you're going to say wrestling, and if you don't
Oh,
say
no.
it, I'll get mad at you, because you have done a wonderful job with that program since we have known each other for so many years.
But I guess this year, my biggest experience as athletic director, or most memorable, is semifinals at your place,
Yes.
volleyball, and we
Yes.
knocked off Vero
Yes.
Beach, and that was a great game.
Is that the first time you guys have
I
beat
think it's the
Vero?
first, and I don't know how long,
Yeah,
but yes,
I know.
and just to get over that hump, and just essential is always football.
And I think the three of us, a lot of times, they'll never take our memories away. And a lot of times I go into my gym and you look at the banners up there and you say, you try to remember those teams. And it was kind of ironic. The other day we played Westwood, and Coach McCarty, who is my coach at Centennial, is now the coach at Westwood. And he came in with two of his former players, and we're looking at all the banners. So we made a big deal about him when we introduced him. And I'm thinking, geez, 10 years ago we averaged 80-something points a game, and those days, they're always going to stick in your mind, and we always have our memories, which I think is one of our greatest things that we can do. We miss the day-to-day with the kids, but we have the memories. And I think a lot of times we share with our coaches. I mean, when they lose, we know there's nothing you're going to say to them. I mean, I got a point, if my guys lose a tough game, I don't even go and pat them on the back, because the next day is when you talk to them. And I always felt as a coach, whatever you say right after the game is going to go in one ear, out the other ear, right? What you say the next day is more important. But when they win, you're there to share it with them. And I think that's something that, if you're not an athletic director, you don't understand that. You really don't. Now, this is something that I think it's something that we're going to have to deal with. You guys are going to have to deal with it more than me, since I'm kind of leaving town in June. But the changes in high school athletics over the years. I mean, what stands out for you, Jill?
Right now, it's the cost. I mean, being
Okay.
new at this job,
Yes.
the cost of transportation.
Yeah.
the cost of uniforms, you know, getting these teams from point A to
Right,
point B
right.
safely and back home again.
Right.
They've grown leaps and bounds from when we were all in school. I mean, there's so much more opportunity for the students these days to help promote them, to get them on to college and maybe to that next level
Yeah.
if they're lucky. But it's just an ever-growing thing that we've got to deal with.
And a lot of times, and just harping in on that subject a little bit, we had my guidance counselor, Fred Alamade, you know Fred, who's excellent in what he does. We had a whole show explaining to parents how you get college scholarships. And you know, the first thing is your grades. It's not like 20 years ago, because if you were great, you were going to get in. Now, if you're great, you might not get in, and that's what you got to sell to the parents, because everybody wants the scholarship now.
Exactly.
On the other topic with the money, you know, we have not a pay to play, but we have an athletic fee that pays for the insurance and pays for our transportation. You know, otherwise we wouldn't have that. Now we're $100. Some states are $400, $500, $600 per sport. I mean, up in the Midwest, I think Ohio was one of them, and the state legislature said, you want sports, you're going to do that. But that has been a major change. Pete, what's another major change?
Well, I think the growth of the state, there's so many more schools now in
Okay.
the state. And in some sports, to be competitive, you need to travel a little bit.
Correct.
So, which is obviously going to be, you know, costly to travel. But, you know, you got to see the competition. And then also playing out-of-state teams. We're doing it a lot more often than we used to. And in the big sports, you know, like during the summertime they come. I mean, during spring
Yeah.
baseball they come to us.
Right.
But football we might travel, you know, to
Right,
Georgia.
right.
Or,
And who did you have come down last year?
we had a team from Jersey.
Don Bosco,
Don
right?
Bosco
came
Prep,
from
yeah.
Jersey, right? Came down, and you know, Joe, we were talking about, you know, Pete just mentioned about traveling.
Yes.
Your district right now, you do a great deal of traveling just to play your district games.
Yes, we do.
And one of the reasons is, you know, when I first started coaching, you know, way back when in the 80s, there was 4 classes. There was about 500 and something schools. So we had 125, 130, maybe 140 in each class. Now there's 9 classes. And some classifications only have 45 and 50 schools. Now, I'm not the one to understand why, and
Right.
sometimes I don't, but if you go to the regionals, you're going to have 1 in every 3 teams make it to regionals, and that's what is that saying? That's really watering down. I mean, you know, when I was down at Pace and we won the state championship in 3A, I mean, geez, we beat 125 teams. Now you're getting, you know, it has changed a lot. Another thing that changed a great deal, and you know, we could talk a whole show on this, is safety issues, okay? Maybe it's because we know more now. You know, the question, and I mentioned to Pete and I mentioned to Jill, is, you know, let's look at football first. You know, I just found out a few weeks ago I'm going to be a grandfather. So the first thing, yes, that's very, very happy with that, okay? And my son mentioned to me, Dad, are you going to let, if it's a boy, let him play football? You know, say 10, 12 years from now. Now, with all these theories coming out, and I know that movie's coming out at Christmas, okay, called Concussion, is supposed to be very revealing, that they're making theories that you should not start playing tackle football until you're 15 and 16. I mean, this is a sport that I love. I mean, I'm a baseball guy, but I love watching football. I know you guys do too. What do you think? Do you think that the state's going to implicate changes, or more than the state, the National Federation? Do you think they'll put an age limit on tackle football?
Since we don't have football,
Yeah.
that's a tougher question
Yeah.
for me to answer.
Well, what do you think? What do you
What I
think?
think, I don't know so much age, and maybe that would be a good way to look at it.
Yeah.
But we have kids at our school, since we're 6 through 12, that age-wise, some of those kids, they just never start growing until much older. So we could have a young man that's 15 but still be small, even with soccer. I mean, the concussion level at soccer,
yeah.
and that's our substitute for basically football.
Right.
Even though everybody else has soccer too, that's the one that I worry about.
Right. And what did the outlaw the hitting in soccer for youth leagues. I think 11 and
league.
under. And you know, we, for people that don't know, we have to follow a concussion protocol that's very, very similar to the NFL, that if somebody has a concussion, they must go to a neurologist and they must follow the step-by-steps and a return to play. I'm Pete, as a wrestling guy, I mean, you see it in wrestling first. Let's talk about that.
Well, I've actually had a couple concussions back in high school, but yes, you do.
Now, wait a minute, let me ask you a question.
Yes.
When you got the concussion back, did you know it was a concussion? Or did you just say, hey, I got hit in the head?
Well, in football, they would call it, you got your belt rung.
And
or
just get
whatever,
back
yeah.
in.
And
See how the
yeah.
names have changed?
And
Yeah.
in wrestling, though, it was you blacked out. I blacked out, so I knew I had a concussion.
Did you have the protocol back then?
The first one,
Okay. You
there was a
did.
couple. The
Yes,
first one was during
yeah,
season, so
yeah.
I was just couldn't, just irritable, light, or my eyes
Yeah.
sensitive. So I stayed out about a week before I felt better to get back.
But
in.
there was nothing official back
No.
then. There was nothing.
No, I didn't feel right, so I
Yeah.
kept myself
Yeah.
out, kind of. The second one, it would return quicker.
Right.
It wasn't. I don't think it was as bad as the first one that I experienced.
Another thing, a lot of states are cutting back on the number of games being played. Okay, now it has to do with the money issue, has to do with transportation, but a lot have to do with the safety issue. Do you know there's some high schools in Florida that'll play just as many football games as the pro teams this year?
Because of the playoffs.
Because you have the preseason. Now, we're not even going to talk about the spring game in May. So you got a preseason game in August. You got 10 regular season games. That's 11. You got 5 playoff games. That's 16. And some of them get into bowl games. So that's 17 games. When your colleges are playing 12, and then a bowl game is 13. So there is something. But then you're always going to get the argument, and it's not from us. It's from people around the state. They need that revenue to run every other sport. But that's something I think they're going to have to look at. That look, how many games are we playing? Is each game and each time you're getting hit, the same thing we talked about in baseball. We had a show with 2 baseball coaches on. How many pitches you're going to throw? Sooner or later, you're going to hit that limit, okay? And that arm's going to go. And one thing that I think as athletic directors, we all agree that you should try to play as many different sports as possible. John Smoltz, who's a great Hall of Fame pitcher, got inducted this year. The first thing he said, they were asking him about arm injuries. He says, I want my kids to play different sports. Don't play baseball all the time. And I think that's one of our problems as athletic directors. And I'll go to you first, Joe. If you have a great coach and he's got this program year-round,
Exactly.
What do you say to him?
Exactly. It does limit, especially when you got a child who wants to branch out and try something else. I mean, I'll use one of our middle school basketball players.
Okay.
She is an awesome, awesome soccer player.
Okay.
But her heart is given to Coach Adams to play basketball.
Right.
So it'd be nice if they were able to branch out and do that. But with how things are now these days and wanting to get that scholarship possibly to go on to college,
and there's a lot of pressure in the scholarships because
Exactly.
it's money. And years ago, the seasons would not overlap. You always, I remember when I first started, we had our one season, then we had a whole break in there, okay? And I think one of the reasons is the playoffs are expanded so much.
Yes.
What did you say, Roger? Went an extra 4 or 5 weeks for
at
the
least.
playoffs because they stretch it out so much. I know baseball's almost 5 weeks for the playoffs. Football's 5 weeks for the playoffs. So you're really stretching it out and you're taking them away from another sport. And in our position, we want them to play as many sports as possible. But then you get the great coach who's got the great program, I always remember, I think, Pete, you'll know who I'm talking about, Luana Davis, who played for us. She was our star softball player, but she was really best in basketball. She went to Old Dominion, got a scholarship. But she wanted to play softball, and she wanted to do track at the same time. So, of course, my coaches had a difference of opinion, so we had a little meeting, and I said, it's either going to be what Luana wants or this. Well, she ended up going to the Final Four in softball and won a state championship in track. That was extraordinary. But back then, we did not have as many games, and it was spread out over a longer period of time. You know, that's something we have to deal with, and I think that the safety issues, you know, are really coming into focus now. I mean, I read up a few books on concussions after, you know, when I go see that movie, I want to just make sure I know what I'm seeing. And it's amazing how for all these years that the NFL ignored it. And you see a lot of these ex-football players, you know, they're limping around, they're walking around, they don't know who they are, some of them. I know my middle son works down at Jupiter Medical Center, and he says Joe Namath's down there a lot. And he's having problems down there, you know. But what other safety issues do you think we could put in? What safety issues that you think we could put in to protect our kids now, or we would like to put in? You know, we'd like to have a doctor.
Question.
We'd like to have a doctor in every game,
exactly.
but it's
Yes.
not going to happen. You know.
Yeah.
One thing is, I'll tell you another thing that we're trying to do, or the state's trying to do. The EKGs, okay? It's very, very expensive, okay? Mrs. Lulu from the Jessica Clinton Foundation, I think everybody knows the story. Her daughter passed away at my school years ago, and she has been on this crusade, and it's a wonderful crusade about making sudden cardiac arrests awareness to everybody, and she's the one who has pushed to put the EEGs in all the schools, okay? And she has done just such a wonderful job. Excuse me, EEGs, AEDs. I'm getting my letters mixed up here today. But she has done a wonderful job with that, and she had a free heart screening, and she said it was packed. They were turning people away. They had so many people in November. What I'm going to try to do in June is see if we can do the heart screening in conjunction with our physicals, if she can work that out. It's going to be a little bit difficult, but if she can work that out, that would be wonderful. But that's something down the road. You remember when we went to the compliance seminar in Venice?
Yes.
What did the doctor say? Everybody's talking about concussions. Nobody's talking about sudden cardiac arrest, which to him was a bigger deal, you know, on that. If you had to look at any changes in our athletics in our county, okay, what would you like to say?
As I discussed with you earlier, I would like to see not only our parents of our athletes having to pay for the student insurance. I think that burden should fall upon all the organizations and groups that get to use that insurance
Yeah.
if they're on a trip and something happens. I think the burden has been greatly put on the shoulders of our parents of our athletes
Okay.
to take all that on. And I mean, asking a parent $100 for an athletic card, and we have a lot of parents at our school that have more than one child. And when you're looking
Yeah.
at $300, $400, $500
Right.
that they're paying out for athletic cards, to me that's a big
And
financial
if they buy
responsibility.
the athletic card, we have to encourage them to buy it in the beginning of the year so they can go to all the events for free. The kids that buy the athletic cards in February, they're going to miss all the basketball and the soccer and the volleyball games. You know, when we throw that free athletic card, and you know, Jay and I used to talk for a long time. Is this going to limit attendance? And attendance went up. And we said, how did that happen? Well, I got the athletic card. I'm going, and I'm
Right.
bringing you and you with me because I got to use my card. So our attendance actually went up with that. But that's one of the perk we try to give with that.
Right.
Pete?
I would like to maybe get some more events or teams in middle school and open
Okay.
up the middle school.
Okay.
Because you know certain sports you get them in high school and they've never played a particular sport. You know I don't whether it's tennis, wrestling, obviously some other sports. You can have competitions in middle school and then when they get to high school at least they know how to play them.
You know, my big thing, and I always talk to the FHSAA about this, is you don't teach us how to coach. Well, that's not our job. Well, maybe it is, okay? You don't teach us how to, you give us rules and regulations, but there should be some classes on coaching. Look at the book we get. We get a red book that's like this, right? There's more rules and regulations. Now, our coaches can give you the bylaws sometimes, okay? We can give them the bylaws. But what happens when you lose 3 games in a row and your star player's out? Who tells you how that? There's got to be a class or some kind of teaching method. What do we do for our teachers? We want our teachers to improve every year. What do we do for our coaches? Not much. A guy comes in with a big resume. Here I am, Joe. I did this, I did this, I did this. What's the first question you're going to ask him? Okay, that's fine, but I try to do, when I do an interview, I give them a real life situation. And boy, I got plenty of them, so I got down the road for all these years. But I mean, we don't teach our coaches how to coach. When do we go to coaching seminars? Now, I don't know if you guys remember, years ago, we went to a lot of the FACA coaching clinics. I know baseball was in Daytona. I don't know if volleyball was somewhere. And I know you always had the big wrestling one, but we would go and listen to the top coaches in the state. I didn't want to hear a college coach. I wanted to hear a high school coach so I can steal what he's doing. And I mean that in a nice way. I want to steal your ideas. I want to say, but we don't do that anymore. I always harp, and I'll have a little more time next year and see if I can push the FHSAA into do coaches clinics, not just about rules, but about how to coach. It's an art. It's an art form, okay? The best coaches are the ones who learn from their peers, all right? I always try to tell, when we have that meeting at the beginning of the year and we have the 200-300 coaches in there, yeah, look at you. Look at the people around you. You want to learn something, copy from them, okay? And you always take the best program. Take the best program and see what they did. Of course, they're going to have great athletes, but see what they did to get there. Pick their brains. Try to work backwards, and see what you can do. Any thoughts on that, or any of your feelings on that?
Oh, I think that's a wonderful idea. I mean, there's always those situations when you especially have a young coach that just, is coming right in and doesn't have a clue on how to manage.
That's a great point. Manage
a team. Yes. Yes.
And then you go to the other extreme. There's people that want to be managers. I can make this lineup. But are you teaching them fundamentals? Pete, you know that with wrestling, you can have somebody, he can be an All-American wrestler, but can he get his point across, There was a friend of mine named Bobby Floyd who used to work for the Mets, and I coached his son over at Port St. Lucie High School. And I watched Bobby with the major leaguers. I watched him with high school kids. I watched him with Little League kids. And he taught on every level. That's a coach to me.
Yes.
A coach is somebody, a coach is a teacher. But again, what are we doing? I'm throwing out, not that you guys have the answer, because I don't. What are we doing to make our coaches better? Okay? I just won a state championship. Okay, now what are you doing next year? Okay, are you going to improve? Okay? If you have talent, there's people that can't mess up talent. But are you going to teach your guys? Like you said, didn't you feel good when you took that team that was 1-15 and made it to the finals? How did that? Because you taught them, Pete. That's the way to go through, But, I mean, that's something, hopefully, the FHSAA, when they do their compliance seminars, they can come out with two of the athletic directors and say, look, we have these classes. Take the best coaches in the state. Take people around the state who are successful, that are teachers, okay? But our time's going real quick. I told you it went fast. I want to thank you guys. I mean, I'm very, very proud to work with you guys, and credit to St. Lucie County. And, we're getting right near Christmas, so I hope everybody has a happy holiday season. And thanks for another edition of Hey Coach.